I appreciate that.
Sure.
You know, we don't have subways or really any kind of massive bus transit in Orange and Rockland counties. So I just hope that that is not held against us, that we are in the MTA region. A more specific, it's not a question because we've had conversations about this. I do want to thank you and your department for the renewed leadership on a specific project. That's the exit 131 interchange adjacent to the Woodbury Commons. We've spoken about that, and I just want to reiterate my strong support for it and desire to see this funding appropriated as soon as possible, particularly with the casino about an hour north up in the Catskills, beginning construction and opening in the near future, and all that traffic coming through that interchange. It's even more urgent now than ever. So I just want to reiterate and thank you for your support with that project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Mark Panapinto.
Yes, Commissioner, how are you?
Hi, Senator. Good.
First of all, I'm just incredibly impressed by your ability to field these questions. You're being cross-examined by, a number of Assemblyman senators and doing a great job. I want to echo what Senator Young had to say about the 219 connector. It really is a regional, bipartisan issue that we love the DOT to look at it. And it really opens up a corridor from Toronto, whether it be Miami or Maryland and Pennsylvania. And it's very important for us. Thank you. On talking about Region 5, which is Western New York, we've talked about parity, and you're probably sick of hearing about it, but in Region 5, we have 12.5% of the roads and bridges. And in my county, Erie County, we have the most road miles of any county in the state by the DOT. And our funding level is at less than 9%, probably about 8.5% is what we're getting in Region 5 right now. How are we looking at the parity formula? And I know you've asked this in a number of ways, but I'm asking it from a sheer percentage standpoint. We've got 12.5% of the roads and bridges. We're getting 8.5% of the funding. That's not parity, as I see it. So how do you address that?
Well, I think you have to address it. You work with a certain amount, but you have to address it in terms of what the conditions are in a given area, Region 5 or elsewhere. The use, the number of users of a particular roadway or bridge or what have you. And I think that plays a lot into it. And again, I mentioned safety because at the end of the day, if a particular roadway is unsafe or a particular bridge, we want to work, whether it's state or with locals, to ensure that it becomes safe. So that's generally how we view it. I think there's a tendency, perhaps I've heard in the past, where people think, well, one particular area gets more money because they may have more people or not. And that's really not the case. Of course, dollars in this day and age, whatever venue you're in, are always very competitive, as I think we could all agree. We have a big system with a lot of need. The percentage of our bridges are in pretty good shape, both local and state, probably somewhere about 72% in good shape. There's challenges in other areas, obviously, and our roadways are generally in good shape. But as we continue to see the climate changes that we've experienced over the last few years, that really impacts conditions as well. So we're not playing favorites. We're really trying to take a methodical, thoughtful analysis of the system in its entirety. It may not always equate to a particular percentage, but we try to look ahead at what the needs are given that criteria.
And I want you to understand, I'm not one of these upstate senators who is anti the MTA. I understand the economic impact,
right,
and I support full funding of MTA spending and infrastructure spending.
Right.
But in upstate, we have drivers. We're undergoing a renaissance in Western New York, and as I talk to building contractors, we're building Solar City. We've got a medical campus. We need the roads and bridges to improve capacity,
right,
so that we can utilize these wonderful facilities we're building. So I just want you, as you're looking at hopefully a 5-year DOT plan. I'm not sure if we're going to get a 5-year plan in this year, but I think it's important to look at those percentages and dollar values, and we want to get our fair share, and it's not to slight the MTA. We need to build up the MTA, and I support the spending in the city on those projects. On a separate issue,
I was looking at the budget, and there's a 5-year extreme weather infrastructure hardening program appropriation.
Right.
We couldn't find it in your agency's appropriation. How are those projects going to be selected and funded?
Well, again, it'll be by analysis. We'll look at historic data, and there's plenty of that. I just mentioned there's been a significant change in the last several years of weather patterns. So whether it's been these vortexes that we've had, and thankfully we haven't experienced that this year, but if you look at Hurricane Irene or Tropical Storm Lee or certainly Superstorm Sandy, things are changing. And so with those changes and particular, location plays a role in that. If you're in the Hudson Valley as an example where you've got, high hills and narrow roadways, we've seen impacts that we hadn't seen before. The governor smartly, in my opinion, is placing money now for us to go out and identify where those particular roadways may be. Perhaps there's grading work or other things that we might be able to do to prevent flooding of a parkway, or how we really look at culverts. I come from, in my previous work with the state, working with water and sewer infrastructure. And, that's something that I've been broaching and discussing with our people as we think about long-term. Stormwater management is becoming a critically important issue. It's really changed, over the last 5-6 years. And it's an area that I want DOT to change with, too, because we need to be smart about how we also direct waters from our systems, because likely they could impact locals. So the long or the short answer is that, we are going to take a careful look and analysis to see historically where these roads have largely been impacted because of severe weather, and we hope to make a difference with those funds. There's $500 million now that he's appropriated in this proposed budget to do so, and I think it's money well spent based on what we've seen over the course, certainly of the last 6 years.
Well, since you mentioned stormwater, I may be the only senator that knows what, a stormwater protection plan is, as provided by the New York State Department of Transportation. I mean, I've looked at specs and plans and dealt with contractors in this regard. But that follows up my next question, and this goes to what the Assemblyman was asking earlier about, where we are in our staffing. And I know I've asked the DOT last year to give me some of the economic justifications for the so-called cost savings on the consultants that we're using, and really this contracting out issue of engineers and people who are on site, doing inspections. Inspections and engineers has been a big part of what DOT does.
Right.
And I know in Western New York and Region 5, I think all of our inspection is contracted out. So I'd like to know what the economic analysis the DOT has done to really quantify whether or not there have been real cost savings in doing that.
Well, the straight answer is I've not seen that. I intend to look at it. It's one of the historical things that's taken place at DOT, before my arrival. But I would say that, again, from kind of an operational or a business perspective, we have a strong engineering force that, as you know, does a lot of things, a lot of important things. So we augment that with consultants, engineers, to support the efforts of not only, our local folks, but to go out on case-by-case or special project areas and provide resources that perhaps we might not have. But I think there's a second piece here that we should think about, which is, while DOT, in my opinion, has adequate staffing to continue to deliver, while we also utilize the private sector for engineering work, we are also supporting another economy as well. These are people that live in all of our communities, who go to our local grocery store, who pay our property taxes, who send their kids to our school and pay school taxes as well. So I look at it in the sense that while we do utilize contractors or vendors to support our engineering services, we're also helping support another sector of the economy in New York State.
And I completely understand that. I mean, but and as I said, Region 5 DOT, Daryl Kaminsky, the director there, has been incredibly responsive. But as I talk to contractors and labor folks, they really ascribe the lack of engineering infrastructure, as the reason why we're not getting contracts let. in an appropriate time frame. And as we talked about, we have a limited construction window to build in New York State. It's more limited in Western New York.
Right.
And so when a project goes out to bid in November and we're not breaking ground until June, that's a problem. We're losing 2 or 3 months of the construction season, and it's really, I think, incumbent upon the DOT to be looking at that to make those projects work in Region 5 and all of the upstate regions in a timely fashion. We want to get construction workers in the field in April
Right.
and not in June.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And, that's part of the, kind of evaluation that I've been doing. I've made some changes already operationally, administratively, at the Department of Transportation, policy-wise. But that is an area that I'm looking at and will be looking at. I hear you. I mean, I've heard this from other people, and I experienced it myself years ago. It's a big ship. But, look, we can find ways that we also can modernize ourselves and be more efficient. Somebody mentioned earlier about cross-training. It's another area that I'm interested in. While many people have specialized areas in DOT, I'm a big believer in cross-training, so that people are able to do and function in more than one capacity. And I'm not suggesting that they can't. What I'm suggesting is perhaps it's not utilized to the degree it should be. That'll be part of my evaluation as I continue forward in this role.
Well, I'm looking forward to working with you on that. And as you address that economic analysis, I'd really like to be able to share that with the Senate Assembly to see whether or not we really have saved money by downsizing from our public employees.
Okay, good enough, fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I would like to announce that Senator Phil Boyle has joined us.
Assemblywoman Simmons.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. I would like to follow up a little bit on Senator Savino's questions with regard to the Gowanus Expressway. We have, for the last decade or so, 200,000 cars and trucks a day on the Gowanus Expressway, which is bleeding over into local streets. And the communities and the state DOT worked for a long time together on a major environmental impact statement, a major investment statement with regard to that, and found actually tunnel alternatives that would work very well, would add capacity. It would allow you to clean the air as well. The primary reason why we've been told for years you couldn't increase capacity was the Federal Clean Air Act.
Right.
Meanwhile, it's the particulate matter that is the schools are along the Gowanus Expressway, and the children are breathing in all this stuff, and it's costing us more socially. And now, of course, the western area of Brooklyn is undergoing renewed interest. And the idea of being able to take down this corroding expressway and open up the waterfront is tremendously attractive, and we think very economically and environmentally, fiscally responsible. However, there was a proposal to add some sort of elevated HOV, which really hasn't happened. So I would like to know the status of that and whether that is going to happen. And if not, to encourage a very serious second look at the Gowanus Tunnel. And I know that the Senator and I would be happy to host you in our districts to tour this area so you could see firsthand what's going on. So if you could just tell me a little bit about what you know about the status of that other HOV.
Well, very little. I don't believe that it is slated to go. Candidly, I'm sure it's a funding challenge. I do want to say, though, that I am a firm believer in and recognize the importance of these air quality issues. Where I lived many years ago, we had a particular area in our downtown that was put on a list, if you will, from the federal government as being a very dangerous area. And so there was some mitigation done of that. And I guess the point I'm saying is that going forward, these are the types of things that I think are important that we recognize and think about as well. So we just don't build something, but we do it correctly so that we do that in balance with our surroundings. I'm a big believer in kind of land use planning. Traffic systems, roadways, arterials, they're all important to move people and goods. But to me, they're also important for quality of life issues. And so how do we build around those as well? And air quality is very important to that, particularly in these days. And it'll continue to be so. going forward. So I'm happy to take a look at that. But to answer your question, I do not believe that the deck program is slated to go.
Okay. And you mean by slated to go forward
be
or
built.
just not go?
Correct.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge, and I'm looking to my
Okay.
left. It's not.
Okay. And then another question I had is you mentioned earlier about the BQE being transferred over to the city DOT. And I know that that is the case with regard to the triple cantilever, which goes the sort of northern part above the connection to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and around Brooklyn Heights and on up to the Kosciuszko.
Right.
My question is, since we were talking about the Gowanus, which is part of the BQE, it's the same interstate, is there a line at which you would be transferring to the city DOT, or am I to understand that the whole Gowanus Expressway will then go to the city DOT as opposed to state?
Well, the HOV lane, that's what I was speaking to,
Okay.
would be transferred for operating and maintenance
I
purposes
see.
to the city. So we're having those conversations. I had a chance to meet Polly Trottenberg, a month or so ago, and our staffs are interacting as we speak. I'll continue to meet with the commissioner as well, because obviously there's lots of challenges there. And again, to the degree that I can, I want to make sure that we're on the same page and coordinate our activities.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Kruger has some questions.
Thank you very much. So you didn't think there could be any left. So I'm going to try to make mine a lightning round for you. So several members already raised the question of the 2015-16 MOU. You explained it hadn't been signed. You explained that you were in negotiations with the legislature still. Who in the legislature? I'd like to talk to them.
No, what I said, Senator, is that it's my understanding that the MOU had not been signed, but DOT is committed to the projects that were a part of that list nonetheless. It's my understanding that that list is with the staff of the legislative bodies.
And have any of those projects actually begun in 15-16?
Yes.
Yes. So then we should be able to get a list of the projects that have actually already started.
I believe the staff has the list, I believe.
Staff to...
The legislature.
So would Kathy Young's staff have it as the finance chair?
Ways and Means and Senate Finance.
So, okay, so I could perhaps ask you for it then. Thank you. I will ask Kathy Young for that. Thank you. Jumping back, 2010-14 capital plan. Can we get a master list of what was completed during that 5-year plan, and are there projects that are still in the pipeline from that time period?
Yeah, I don't know if there are, but we can get you the projects that have been completed, yes.
Okay. One of the issues that was raised to me was that for the 10-14 plan, we got federal stimulus monies, the old ARRA funding, and that there was supposed to be a 3-year deadline for completing projects, that the reappropriations in the department's budget still show there's $500 million reappropes outstanding. I'm just concerned that, one, if we're not spending them, we might face actually having to give them back. So I'm wondering whether perhaps I'm wrong that there is still $500 million outstanding yet to be spent from the old ARRA money.
Yeah, my understanding is the ERA funding is complete.
So you think that reappropriate actually money has been spent? So if staff could just double check, and
yes,
we'll try to coordinate why we thought there was still $500 million left. Thank you. Lots of people asked about the PAVE and bridge funding.
Right.
But there used to also be a funding stream, I think on a 5-year level, for something called the Infrastructure Hardening Fund. And we couldn't find the Extreme Weather Infrastructure Hardening Program appropriation in this year's budget proposal. Can you just clarify, is that program still exist and is there money for it?
Well, this is in the proposed budget. I can't speak to the previous, but we can find that for you.
So you think there is money for the infrastructure hardening program in the proposed budget?
And I believe that may be rolled into this, but I'll need to clarify that and get back to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The dedicated highway and bridge trust fund.
Right.
So the controller's most recent report found that only 25% of that dedicated highway bridge trust fund was actually dispersed for capital construction. Can you project for me in the 15-19 capital plan how much of that money is intended to be used for capital construction and how much of that money needs to go into operating expenses and debt service?
As I mentioned earlier when I was asked, I can't because I don't know that answer. I know we are reprogramming, so that again is more information that I would need to get to you.
And is it your understanding that will need to actually show up in a budget bill at some point, but the details haven't been worked out yet?
I'm saying that we are reformatting our budget with the proposed budget before you, and so as we go through now creating some new criteria for programs like Pave New York and Bridge New York, we are also reprogramming the portfolio.
Thank you. There's been lots of discussion about the issue of parity between MTA versus everything else. Some people talk about it as an upside-down state. I'd prefer to talk about it as sort of mass transit versus highways and bridges. When the state is talking about calculating the numbers and trying to answer the questions about parity, parity can mean lots of different things. So are we talking about looking at population or system users, or what kind of standards are actually
as I
used?
mentioned, I think previously, systems, conditions, use, all play into the criteria that we look at. We don't want to make decisions just based upon geographic location. That may not be an indicator that there may be a particular need.
The price of oil is going down dramatically, or has come down dramatically. That has, I think, potentially two big impacts for state government. One, if in fact the cost of gas and oil have been used as a basis for seeing skyrocketing costs in your budgets, are we seeing money savings because now gas and oil cost so much less?
In terms of the use for us in
For
our
you,
operations?
for your contracts, for your operations?
Well, I have to assume that we're seeing savings based upon the cost of fuel.
Okay. Then, of course, we also draw revenue from the gas taxes
Right.
in New York State. So could you give me a sense of what projected loss in revenue we think the state might face based on the lowered cost of gas, meaning less tax revenue into a number of the programs you depend on?
I couldn't. Much like it varies across counties who count on that tax revenue from the sale of petroleum, I don't know what the number would be and the impact it would be for New York State.
So you didn't use any new calculator for determining lost revenue into your budget for the coming year?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No. So maybe a good question for Tax and Finance
Sure.
when they testify. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Assemblyman Gant,
Thank
second
you.
go around.
I'll keep it short, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Mr. Commissioner, as you know, I'm Dave Gant. I was offered, at least I offered, at the groundbreaking ceremonies at the railroad station there in Rochester, I offered free consultant services. And so I'm going to offer you the same thing. I'm going to offer you my free services. He's watching very carefully as to what I say. But it's free. Because I'm the only one who knows where the pillar is that goes in front of that station from back in 1950. So those services are still there. Hopefully you will give me the opportunity to continue to serve you free. However, at that particular meeting, the mayor, who's a young woman in our town, was not even born yet. She just got information from her consultant that it would cost her probably 3 times as much or cost the state probably 3 times as much for a bus station as it would if we did that station now. So she took me up on my free services contract with the state, with the commissioner, and she asked if I would go and consult for her free on the issue of whether or not the state should try and purchase the bus stations, the multimodal stations. So she wants you to come in and purchase that at $3 million rather than $9 million. And so that's what I'm asking today, that you simply take a look at whether or not we ought to do the bus station now rather than later. My office still stands that I will consult on that pillar. Nobody knows where that pillar goes but me. So that's free. Okay. And the services I'm providing for the mayor is free. So I don't want anybody to leave out of here saying it's anything else but free. So we'd like to have you do that in Rochester. It's about the multimodal, and we think we can save money.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I did meet with the mayor just last week on that subject and others, and I'm in the process of gathering information.
So you can tell I did my job free.
You did your job.
Consultant. There are some people in here, consultants in here looking now, so I want to make sure I got that on the record. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're just joined by Senator Joseph Griffo.
Finished? Thank you. I guess I'll get you to close. Of the $22.1 billion 5-year capital plan, is there a priority or any emphasis given to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructures?
Yes, sir, there is. It's actually part of our Complete Streets program. And in fact, we look to build those elements into all the projects that we look at as how we can better serve the pedestrian and bicycling communities throughout New York State.